All right, guys. Hey, this video is going to be a little bit different than other videos I've done so far. And we're always up here trying for new things. I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of the ideal squad size and the ideal makeup of your squad, right? It really sort of depends upon the type of league that you're in and the number of players you have access to. Of course, naturally, it depends upon what the rules are, right? If your rules only limit you to like 20 players on a squad, then 20 players is probably the ideal size. But for most squads, you probably want something that's a little bit larger. So I'll show you sort of what I think about. I haven't had much success so far in this save, getting things down to where we really want it to be. I probably should have cut a bunch of guys out beforehand, but decided not to anyway for reasons that are unclear to me at the moment. So really what you want, you can see you have 11 different positions. Ideally, you want to have at least 2 guys capable of playing at each position, which would be 22 players. And then maybe a couple of other players who can play multiple positions, or maybe somebody who doesn't play that often but is an older guy who, sort of can take charge of helping lead the club or something like that, right? But overall, what you really want to see is you want to see, probably no more than about 25 players or so, really regardless of the type of league you're in. There is one exception to this, which is that if you have one of those leagues where we're talking not like one match a week, but like literally 2 matches a week, every single week, like for the whole season, rare in real life, but does happen with some editor data files. If you're talking about that kind of league, you might want to have 3 players in every position just to make sure that you have some there to deal with injuries that will come. But for the most part, you're probably okay having 2 guys at each position. The idea is you really want to have one player who is like the established player, who's going to be the starter, and then another guy who is a young player who can play in a backup role, and maybe play every once in a while, or play some friendlies, play some cup matches that aren't important to you or whatever. And so that's sort of the idea, right? We don't do it here. You can see right now from the goal keepers that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different goalkeepers who we probably will never play. Getting Leitbolden, I thought, was a fairly good idea. I was hoping that, with his consistency, with his excellent ability right now, leading player in the league, and with his international experience, that he could probably challenge Leach Haba for the starting goalkeeper spot. But as we've seen in prior matches, there's just simply no way he's going to do it because Leach Haba is so much better than everybody else in the league. And so what we do as a result is we kind of have Leitbolden as the backup. He seems happy with being the backup. He's going to play, but won't really play necessarily that much. Yeah, he's satisfied with the amount of games he's been getting, which is great. As long as we can keep him on, we'll keep him on, because what that means is that as long as he's on our club, he's not playing for another club. There's no reason for us to have these 3 guys, right? They're all out of contract. We're not actually paying them money. Really, Wu Shengjie is probably the one that we actually want to have. The coach report will tell us that he's number 3 in line, does well in training. Lighthearted and jovial means that he maybe could be close to being a model model citizen, depending upon whatever attribute it is that has darted down a little bit for lighthearted and jovial. So it's possible. Yeah. Unflappable is a good media handling style. Media friendly is not, but there is a chance that he might have a fairly good level of professionalism. So that's another thing to sort of look for. We look at our defensive backs and stuff. Remember, Kader Bamba right now is not registered, so we actually do only have 6. Here we are following the rules that I sort of have made up kind of arbitrarily. Interesting that Liu Chunjie ends up being at the very bottom of the list. This is the guy who scored in today's match. So how about that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 center backs okay is great because we have 3 different positions, so that means 3 for each position. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky when you're trying to set this up, because you'll notice that there are a lot of names that are the same between these two when we're talking about our defensive midfielders. And so this is where, for me, I tend to like get out the pen and paper, or get out the Word document or whatever, and I'll just write this down and try to like figure it out on my own, right? Because things like, where I'm going to play Chen Chengju depends upon where he wants to play. So we go look at him as a player and we see, oh, his green is brightest over there at the defensive midfielder role. We can also go over here to development and training, and we can see clearly here he's a natural defensive midfielder. He can play, he's accomplished down there. He's also accomplished up there. We don't play this position in this particular squad, but because he seems to be best at playing here, we're going to play him here. right? Same thing can be said for Ling Guanda, who can play up front as well. Actually, there are 3 positions where he can play quite well, but we're going to play him further in the back because he just hasn't shown us that he can shoot. In fact, if I look over here, what he needs to do, he has to develop the ability to beat his opponents. That would be helpful. I think we could all develop the ability to beat our opponents. And then you can see here where some of the problems come along, right? So on the left side and on the right side for wingback, we really only have one guy on either side that can actually play there. That's technically not true, right? So if we look over here again at our tactics, our squad right now is a little bit bloated. There are players who could play there, like Joe Zhiwei could play as a wingback. We have to actually play him there for him to be able to. This might actually be somebody to consider giving a little bit more game time to, although our coach thinks that he doesn't have the required ability or potential. Still being a Division 2 player at age 23 is not a good sign. But here's Feng Xiaochi, and the reason why I'm holding on to him is because Feng Xiaochi doesn't enjoy big matches, which we keep seeing whenever he plays against a team that isn't awful, and looks like he is a fringe player. But the Star CTP Premier League is a pretty good idea. He's probably like a 4-star player or something like that. Reason why he's a fringe player is because we have so many players on the squad that are good. And anyway, you can see there are going to be other guys too that show up here and there who technically can play in some of those other positions. Who do we have starting here? Tai Yuting. That's kind of a weird guy to play in that position, but whatever, we'll put him there. Okay, that's what the AI decided to do. I'm looking here to see too if we have any right midfielders as well who can do that. Yeah, Liang Zhenwei also is training and is, hopefully I set this up right. Yeah, he's training to become a wingback. This is a player who's way off of first team level. It would be decent for Division 2. Hopefully we can get him up to where he needs to be. This is a guy who hopefully will make some progress instead of declining as we push forward with his career. At some point in time, he's going to need to get first team game time. And then you can see we do the same thing up here. So the problem that we have again up at the top is that you see a lot of repetition. A number of these guys, we can remove this. Like we know that these 2 are not going to play up front. So there's really only 4 guys that we have who will play in these positions. And we go up front. This is kind of where we have our other mistake, right? Because we really only need to have 2 strikers, and instead we have 7. So that's another thing to sort of keep in mind, right? As it stands now, I haven't really cleaned these out because when we go in and we look at them, they all show the same young prospect way off first team level, right? And so it's kind of hard to tell like who's actually good and who's not. Exciting is a good word to have because that means that he's hopefully a little bit better, right? Go over and look at the media description. There it is, young striker. So, it's possible that he might turn into a wonder kid. We look at this guy's media description. Well, again, young striker, so maybe there's not a huge difference between them. I don't know. But you don't really want to have this kind of setup like we do here because you don't want to have a whole bunch of guys all vying for the same spot. Having 7 on the first team trying to play in the same spot, all guys who really can't play in other positions that you play, is not a great idea. You don't want to do that, right? That's not what you want to do. Oh, look, this guy's wanted by a different team. That's also a good sign for him. You don't want to have that happen. You don't want to have a whole bunch of guys just sort of sitting around doing nothing, especially if you're paying them salary. If that's the case, definitely don't do that, right? So if they're over, like too old for the under 18s and you're looking at them thinking this guy's never going to come onto the squad, if he's out of contract, just release him, right? And if he's not out of contract, so that's what I should do with a bunch of these guys. If he's not out of contract and you're like, well, I don't know, we kind of do need to pay him or do whatever, you can look into loaning him out. You could look into selling him, though if he's not getting game time, he's not really going to sell, right? That's a bunch of other stuff that you can think about and you can look at. But really, overall, the reason why you only really want about 2, maybe 3 players at each of these positions is because you want to make sure that they have the chance to get some game time and that they can rotate in. I'm actually a really bad example of this, right? I play the same. If you watch, the morning videos from day to day, you'll see that I largely have been playing the same squad over and over and over again. That's not good for youth development, and it's not going to be good for us in the long term. We can get away with it because we have those excellent players who are from Cote d'Ivoire and other countries who are just like heads and shoulders above everybody else in the country, you know. So as long as we have players like that, like we can get away with it. We take advantage of the fact that it's only one match per week. But really, if you're talking about like technical form, if this were like, I don't know, figure skating or gymnastics and we had the coaches giving up the numbers, I wouldn't get a very high score for it because we don't have that good technical form where we have guys who will come in, you know, every once in a while for a match and we gave him some game time and he developed and stuff. We haven't really established that yet. So my recommendation for you, again, is at the very least, you know, try to limit your squad. You want to be probably around 25 players or so. Ideally, you want to have a starter and then a prospect at each position. You know, some positions you might not be able to get a good prospect. You might have to bring an older guy in who can still do it but is declining. It's also okay. If you have a league that gives you like legitimately 2 matches per week, like you're doing Champions League and you're doing, you know, I don't know in Europe, what is, I mean, I could say the EPL, but, you know, a lot of those matches you're getting 2 per week on are going to be meaningless cup matches, you know, so, I mean, I don't know, but if you're playing with something, again, like the World Super League modification, and you legitimately have 2 matches a week, like, you know, then you probably want to have 3 players at each position because otherwise you're going to run into major injury problems and you can court disaster. Trust me, I've been there. I've done it. So anyway, there you go. There's your advice for today, and I'll talk with you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.